Hello.
Hi,
Hi.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for coming today's interview. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I'm very glad to invite you as a keynote. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thank you. So let's start. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Thank you. My name is Kinuko and I am a CEO of Top Runner Marketing. And today I'd like to interview about the generative AI because you are a professional about that. So first of all, could you introduce yourself briefly?
Absolutely. And it's a pleasure to be here, Kinuko. My name is Katie King from London, and I have written 2 books published by Kogan Page on how you apply artificial intelligence to business, with a particular focus on AI in marketing and sales and customer experience. I'm also on the all-party parliamentary group for enterprise adoption of AI and the editorial board of the AI and Ethics Journal. And ethics is a big subject at the moment with generative AI.
Awesome. I hope your book's gonna be translated into Japanese too.
I hope so. I hope so. It's in Chinese and Vietnamese and a couple of others. So I'm hoping it will be in Japanese as well.
That's great. So the first question is about some success case study of using generative AI. I think you have already constructed many cases for using generative AI. So could you tell me some recent specific success case studies of using generative AI in terms of the both corporate level and business level?
Absolutely. Both my books have a lot of case studies, successes and failures, but I wanted to give you some very recent ones as well. So the first one is in the UK, and it is a health solutions provider. They're called Simply Health, and they're using conversational AI, and they're using it to really transform the efficiency of the agents that are dealing with the inquiries. So the staff, what they can do is they can reply to email inquiries that come through with a chat GPT enabled response. And that really helps them to ensure that the right information goes to customers in a really timely, speedy fashion. So I spoke with a guy called Dan Eddy there, who is the director of customer service. And he talks about how this AI-enabled email responses, what they do is they handle the frequently asked questions, the FAQs. So it handles 3 of them. Number 1, how do I change my dentist? How do I change my direct debit? Or how do I change my address and my personal details? So typically those are the 3 main ones. And the chat GPT enabled system searches the databases and generates these automated responses. So it's really like a service agent, able to handle these very basic customer queries. And what they're saying here really is that the technology is speeding up that whole process. And so an email that might typically take an agent 12 minutes to handle can now be done in a minute and a half. So that's really like having 10 spare minutes to do much more complex work within the business. So, it's about both internally, they can now go up the food chain and be much more strategic, saving time, and then offering clients, a much more efficient way of handling them. That's one example. Another good example, I tried to kind of give smaller organizations and bigger organizations as well. So you've also got big brands like Heinz, and many of these organizations have jumped on the generative AI trend because it's so important. And so if you think about it from a marketing and a sales and a CX perspective, what they did was they worked with a Canadian agency, a company called Rethink, and they came up with a really creative campaign. And they said, what does AI think that ketchup looks like? And the AI came up with imagery that looks very similar to the Heinz packaging. And then they asked the Heinz various customers on social media, the brand fans, as they call them, come up with a creative prompt, like, for example, ketchup in space. And then they input that into an AI image generator, like a Mid-Journey, DALL-E, that kind of tool. And what they then did was turned that into adverts. So then Heinz came up with a special set of limited edition bottles where they replaced the label with these Heinz AI images. So what you've ended up with is a whole generative AI campaign, creative campaign that AI has really developed. They came up with a gallery, like an art gallery in the metaverse, where people went there to view the AI imagery. And at the end of the day, we're talking here about return on investment and statistics. So this campaign generated 850 million impressions around the world, which is 2,500% more than their media investment generated. And there's a brilliant video. You might want to include a link to it on the YouTube.
All right, don't be surprised if your friends are talking about websites that use artificial intelligence to generate images.
Simply type in a text prompt and it'll create images for you in around a minute.
Results pretty well prove that AI image sourcing associates the word ketchup with Heinz.
It plays an iconic role in pop culture today as well.
But it includes press coverage in trade and art magazines, technology magazines, lifestyle magazines. So it created a whole campaign in its own right. And for me, that really says a lot, because it's about social media, fantastic creative content, but it's also about products, coming up with this limited edition bottle, so the AI is coming up with the labels and the bottling and the packaging. And if you think about it, marketing is the 4 Ps: product, price, place, promotion. So a generative AI can really talk to all of those different important aspects of marketing. And then one final example, and this one I think is really important. We've come out 2 or 3 years ago, from the world of COVID and the pandemic, which affected everybody around the world. And I think generative AI's role in healthcare is really, really important. So you've got doctors who are spending sometimes 2 hours a day reading and responding to messages through their patient portals. And what generative AI has been able to do, and this is at the University of Rochester, which has a medical center. They've been testing AI models for many, many years and have not had very good success because the data has been messy and it's been quite limited what the natural language processing could do. But now with ChatGPT, they're able to build this model and they can what we call triage, where you decide what's the most critical inquiry that's coming in. So this model is able to test and find out, which needs the doctor's attention in particular. So I thought they were, three good examples of AI being used, or generative AI being used, for corporates and medical institutions, and, that really are having an impact on us.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing the great examples. So because in Canada, the access to medical care is not so good as in Japan compared to Japan. So I hope the generative AI gonna improve such situation, because I had to take my second daughter. She is 1 year old. She felt sick last weekend, and I took her to the medical center, but it took more than 5 hours.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think in the future, not just generative AI, but AI will help us with smart healthcare, where because AI really is about big data, insights. And if we've got insights on the patient and our history and our family history of disease and the way we are, our bloods, etc., we will be able to offer very smart healthcare. And for me, that word smart marketing, smart sales, smart healthcare means we take away the guesswork and we use the insights to be able to offer all different types of customers and clients a very tailored service.
That's a very important point. So related to the sales activities, is there any tips or recommendation to use generative AI in sales activity? Because you have wrote the book is focused on the sales and marketing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think what we're really seeing is how generative AI enables you to create marketing materials that are very customized. So this might be somebody in financial services, it might be retail. And often I talk about how if I am, first of all, I have to give consent. If I give consent to use my data, then you can give me a very personalized experience. Now, this could be through the marketing you do to me. So take my example. I am female from the UK and I'm 57 years old. Historically, somebody selling a insurance policy or a mortgage for a house or even food, coming into a restaurant would have treated me in what I call homogenous, in a very broad group way. Whereas now, if I give consent for my data, they can sell in a very specific way. So they no longer will they say female 55 to 65. They could say Katie, age 57, from the UK. This is her disposable income. This is her history. This is her food preference. She likes meat. Her partner's vegan, etc. And so not only through the way they market to me, which is part of the selling, but when I'm in their bank or in their restaurant, they can treat me in a very specific, personalized, tailored way. So I think that's a really, really important point. They have insights about my history. They can look at people like me. They can predict what I'm likely to do. And then they can write great content and campaigns and know where I'm active on social media or in traditional ways and find me and influence me. So actually, yes, that's about sales, but it's also about marketing and it's also about customer experience. Those three come together in a very kind of holistic way.
Thank you. Awesome. So you mean the generative AI gonna make it more easy to personalization? right?
Absolutely. Mass personalization. In my second book, I have a whole chapter on the paradox of personalization, because many people think AI, generative AI, means the big scary robot coming and taking all of our jobs or dehumanizing the organization. But actually, if I've got insights on all my different types of customers, I can sell to them in a much more specific way. I can write content that's very specific for them. So, that's where a bank or any kind of organization is able to, file a patent, use a ChatGPT like service, help their investors understand and interpret, this is what somebody's savings look like. This is the type of home somebody's looking for. And now let's create social content or an AI powered e-shot out to them and so on. So, that's where it becomes really, really easy to do that.
Thank you. The second question is about the key points and tips for companies. So could you tell me the key points and tips for companies to utilize generative AI based on your experience and knowledge? It doesn't mean specific example.
Sure, absolutely. I'd say for me, it falls into 6 main categories. The main areas that generative AI is really helping with is number 1, cost reduction. Number 2, efficiency. Number 3, growth. Number 4, innovating. Number 5, discovery and insights. And then number 6, perhaps more sort of public services like the medical example that I gave. So, it's really about how can we use AI for the way we deliver our product or service. And then, so any industry sector, whether you're in building services and construction, or if you're a nail art, or if you are in the retail space, there is a way that generative AI can help you deliver the service you deliver. But every sector can use it to do some much more personalized marketing and selling, to do some really good HR work as well. So, if you're using it in a human resources HR sort of environment, it could write job descriptions for you and a competency guide. It might help onboard new staff and so on. So, there's those sorts of ways that are either efficiencies or cost reductions or some kind of continual innovation.
That was very clear to understand many points. So important. So you mentioned at the first part about the success and failure when corporates implementing generative AI. What do you think is the key to success or failure in implementing generative AI?
Really good question. For me, I have an amazing scorecard for success. You're welcome to look at it, and your viewers are welcome to look at it on my website, which is aiinbusiness.co.uk. And it has 10 points, and that's a lot, but actually AI is complex. I won't go through all of them, but number 1, we need the right mindset. Number 3, we need to come up with a business case. And then we need to make sure we've got the right talent. So we need to make sure we understand, what are we trying to achieve with AI? Have we got the right mindset for continuously being agile and adapting? Have we got the right skill set? We're either going to hire, we're going to upskill, we're going to outsource. And there's many other aspects, but they're the key ones. And then the final one, which I think is really important, is we've got to be very clear that we understand the ethics, the compliance, the privacy, all of those sorts of areas as well. So I think they're really, really important factors, not to jump on the bandwagon in a very tactical way, but to really think about what's a problem, we've got that we would like AI to solve. And many of the failures in book number 1 that I wrote, where I interviewed companies, they opened up their shopping bag just to buy some AI to say that they were doing AI. They hadn't thought it through. They hadn't thought through the impact on their staff. They hadn't thought through the impact on their customers and what it was trying to achieve. It was too tactical.
I see. So then you mean that it is very important to clarify their goal or a problem before implementing generative AI, right?
Correct. What's the business plan? What's the goal? What's the problem they're trying to solve? 100%.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's move on to the third question. Could you tell me any important keywords or trends in the use of generative AI in 2024?
Absolutely. And this is a huge area as well. And I'll try and keep very focused. Ethics is huge. So the ethical, safe usage of AI is big. You know, there are new job roles, and there have been for a year or so, but AI ethicists, many examples all around the world of, you know, focus groups and women in AI and all kinds of focus areas on that. So ethical usage, there's more developments in laws. We have the EU AI Act and various UK, US signing safety agreements and so on. So ethics is big because it's about trust. Trust and mistrust is another area that we need to think about. If we don't trust the way a company is going to use our data, we're not going to give consent. We're not going to therefore get back some benefit. So trust, especially in heavily regulated industries like pharma and pharmaceutical and banking and financial services, is important. So ethics, trust, the evolving landscape of regulation, like I just mentioned, but also things like scalability. So yes, we can use this, but can we scale it in our organization as well? And then 3 more, humanity. Having the human in the loop is really important. And I mean that on 2 sides. One, we mustn't let AI just take over our world and humans get reduced to something. We need to maintain the importance of humanity, but also make sure that we have a human in the loop to fact check and avoid hallucinations and you know, because the AI is like a parrot. It's taking in all this incredible data and spilling things out. It doesn't fully understand what it's doing. It's packaging it up. So humanity, creativity, you know, it's important to think about how AI breaks creativity down into a process, but we need to give it a really good prompt to be able to get back that creative material. That they would be, I mean, sentience, you could sort of argue, people are talking about, is AI sentient? Does it feel? No, AI is mimicking intelligent human behavior. So those are probably some of the important keywords that I would refer to.
That's very interesting. I've heard the European country has been tightening some regulations on privacy protection other than other countries. So I was interested in, are there any differences in the ethical use of generative AI compared to the previous regulations, such as privacy policy?
So yes, we have the GDPR, you know, the General Data Privacy Regulations. We've had that for some time. And within that really is just one clause on transparent use of data. But now we have the world's first binding law on AI, and that's much wider, with much wider you know, regulation regarding diversity, inclusion, you know, equality, and so on. So there's a lot more in the AI acts that are coming through at the moment around safety and proper use of AI, and AI not being allowed to making sure that we don't discriminate in terms of the economic disadvantage or gender or race and so on. So you have none of that in the general kind of regulations that we had previously. So yeah, much more wide ranging now.
Thank you. So the next question, fourth question, is about the individual level of AI utilization. How do you use generative AI for your business or your private life?
Yeah, good question. I think we don't all realize just how much AI and Gen AI is in many of the tools that we use. So it's there, isn't it, in many of the tools? But I use a bit of DALL-E and Midjourney, and I use ChatGPT. And then some of my clients use marketing generative AI tools like Jasper. I use Otter AI for transcriptions. And then when I'm using Teams, I've got obviously Gen AI built into it. But sometimes when I'm on Zoom, I use Otter AI and I upload the video, the audio into Otter, and it gives me a transcript. And I use that very effectively in my second book. Many of my clients bring fireflies into meetings, and that's Gen AI capturing the content. I know a conference in the last weeks. I work in a sector called MICE, which is meetings and incentives and conferences and events. So MICE, and they used, I can't remember the name of it now, but they used a generative AI tool to capture the whole conference and to do write-ups and share it with the delegates after and so on. So, it's changing the nature of events, of the way we do our meetings and the way we record them, and the summaries and so on as well. So yeah, loads of different examples there. I've been speaking at some MICE conferences just recently, and again, like I said before, every industry sector has an operational way that AI can be used. So how does a bank use it? How does an events company use it? And then every sector needs to do some marketing, some HR, some sales, some CX, and there are tools that you can use for each of those as well.
Great, thank you. So the fifth question is, do you have any actual AI tools? You have already mentioned a lot, and Otter is, I also using Otter. Do you have any recommend to use generative AI service?
Yeah, there are so many. What I would just really quickly, before I list some of them, I'm not recommending them as such. I've used them. I would always encourage people to go and do their own due diligence, because new tools are coming onto the market regularly. And what I would say is that, AI is so viable now. It's been around for 70 years and it's viable because, number one, we've got big data, and number two, we've got cheap compute power. So therefore, the venture capitalists come into the market, they spend a lot of money. And so there are always new tools disrupting marketing, disrupting events, disrupting. So keep an eye on, because the technology is evolving all the time. So just because something hasn't been around for 2 years, actually, it might be taking advantage of the absolute latest technology. So yes, of course, ChatGPT and Bard, but there are tools like Jasper. There are tools like, and I've been working with these companies and seeing their tools in practice. Iterable, Movable Ink for content, Phrasey for content as well. If you're in marketing and public relations and branding, then there are some existing tools that have been around a while, like Brandwatch, that now have lots of new generative AI brains. Concured for audience insights. Brand24 is helping people with social listening. Wombo is brilliant for sort of imagery. You've got GitHub Copilot, for the actual coding and software as well. SEMrush, which is helping around targeting keywords, all of these sorts of tools. And then, of course, you've got the big ones, the Einstein with Salesforce, and it's embedded into Microsoft tools with Copilot, which is being used by families as well as corporates as well. So, and then there are so many for sales and HR, but we can come back to those later if you want to. But what I do is I do a Google search regularly every day, and I search under news, and I use a Boolean search, which is capital AND. So for example, generative AI, capital AND, marketing, and then search under news, and then I get all the latest articles and tools that have come through. Or I search for venture capital investment in certain tools, or I go and look at Gartner and find out what the cool vendor award is for certain things. So they're some of my resources and ways of keeping up to speed with the latest tools as well.
Thank you. I didn't know many services like Brand24, so I will check up after this interview. Thank you. So the next question is about implementing generative AI into the corporate. So in many cases in Japan, even when companies try to promote the use of AI for their employees, but it sometimes be difficult to increase employees' utilization of generative AI. Like they don't come up with the use of generative AI, even though they can use ChatGPT. So do you have any tips for such a case?
For getting maximum buy-in, you mean, and so on, and getting them to use it and understand it? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Yes, right. The top layers of corporate would want to increase the efficiency by the implementing generative AI, but actually the bottom line, like the players don't use it so much. So
yeah, I've got lots of examples of that. I think often the lack of usage comes back to a lack of understanding. So in my first book, I talk about how a bank in the Scandinavian region, their project for bringing it on board failed because, first of all, they didn't tell their employees and educate them about why they were doing what they were doing. So I think communication is very important. AI filters all the way down the organization. We want our employees across all different departments to understand it. So for me, it starts with the board and the HR team. They need to understand, right, what is this AI? Why are we using it? How are we going to relay that to all of our staff? How are we going to reassure them that this doesn't mean that their jobs are at risk? How are we going to upskill them? So actually, it's about a clear strategy and sharing that vision. It's about educating them about what AI is and how it is now a co-pilot, a tool, an ally, a new way of working. So it's strategy, it's great communication and clarity of communication, it's education. Then I think you need a sort of like an AI playbook that says to starts with HR creating a champion, like an AI champion from this department, coming together and having a regular watching brief on AI in marketing, for example, or AI in education, or AI in whatever sector they're in, understanding what are the tools, what are the benefits, and then playing that back to the organization. So I think it's about then building like an AI playbook that guides people this is how you need to use it. I've been out to Amsterdam working with the Association of Chief Legal Counsel, where the lawyers are worried that their staff will violate copyrights and trademarks. And so protecting the individuals and protecting the brand becomes really important. So staff might not use it because they're frightened, they don't know how, they don't feel like they've got the right kind of guidelines. So if you've got a clear strategy, you've educated, you've reassured, and you've got clear guidelines, and then you monitor it and you evaluate it, that's the key to success.
Thank you. By creating guidelines and playbooks to eliminate the fear or unconsciousness is very important. Thank you.
Pleasure. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is some additional question from me. So many translators and creators will be concerned about the generative AI will take their job instead of them, and they are fear of losing their job. So what should those affected people have to do to survive?
Good question. Generative AI will take the jobs of the people that have not continued to educate themselves and the people that are failing to use the latest tools like the generative AI tool. So it doesn't take everybody's jobs, but it takes the jobs of the people that don't keep up, that don't innovate, that don't share best practice and evolve and add value to their clients, because all of a sudden that company loses market share because its people can't add value in the same way. They don't have the same productivity and so on. So, you know, I'm 57. I have to continuously innovate and learn. So all of us, my advice is, whether you're 20 or whether you're 60, male, female, you know, whatever your gender, whatever your country, you know, whatever your job role, you haven't got to be technical, but you've got to understand these tools, try new things, add value, you know, and keep learning. That's so important.
That's an important comment. It is very important to always assess the level of value we can provide, not just in terms of a generative AI. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Last question is about tips for writing a good prompt for a beginner in generative AI. So do you have any advice for beginners of generative AI?
I do, yeah. I absolutely do. I would say probably 5 things. Okay, number 1, talk to the AI like you would a person. The more specific, a bit like previously long tail keywords in a search, talk to your Gen AI tools like you would to a person with that level of detail. That's number 1. Number 2, you've got to set the stage and come up with some context. So you're not just saying, please write me a 600-word blog on marketing to doctors. You've got to say, right, imagine you're this. Give them some context, give them the country, give them the age bracket, give them kind of paint the picture. Number 3, tell the AI, maybe you could ask it, to the Gen AI tool, to assume an identity or a profession. So imagine you are a marketing director in a company like this, or imagine you are a doctor and you're with your patient and you're considering this. So that's really important. And then the next one, I've got 2 more. The next one is sort of, how do you keep ChatGPT on track? Because it can go off on a tangent, it can fabricate, come up with the wrong answers. You've got to try and keep it back on track. So for example, you could say, please justify that. So why do you think that? Or what evidence do you have to support those answers? So you're checking its understanding and making sure it's on track. And then the final one is not being afraid, you know, not being afraid to play around and experiment. And, you know, it might be that you sort of feed into ChatGPT different prompts, test things out. So imagine you're a toy. It's been left behind in the attic for decades. Tell me what your feelings might be. Tell me what your hope is of being rediscovered. So, it's playing around and experimenting with generative AI. So don't just say, please write me 6 social media posts. Give it that context and that fact-checking example. So there's some of probably my hot tips for making sure you get the best out of your generative AI tools.
Thank you for very practical tips. Sometimes ChatGPT apologize me. Sorry, it was wrong. So
yeah, exactly. You can come up with very unusual answers.
Yeah, that's true. So lastly, could you give some message for the Japanese people who try to start to use the generative AI?
Absolutely. So it's a level playing field. Don't be afraid of it. Don't think that you can afford to ignore it anymore. A year ago, maybe, but now you need to get your hands dirty, play around with it, practice, keep yourself safe. From a business point of view, you need to think about compliance and having an AI playbook and so on individually. Yes, you can use it for homework, for travel, for all kinds of areas. Just test it. Make sure you check the facts. Make sure you give it as detailed a brief as you can. But whatever you do, don't ignore it. It's got to be used, and it's game changing. It's really the defining technology of our generation.
Thank you so much. That's all questions from me.
Been a fantastic interview, Kinuko. Thank you so much.